Record on this computer. So other people can join us later. I thought I'd just take us through the this document. Okay, so this is a document that Rich Sutton posted on Twitter on September 29th. The case for ambition in artificial intelligence research. Within your lifetime, AI researchers will understand the principles of intelligence, what it is and how it works, well enough to create beings of far greater intelligence than current humans. This will change everything. The way we work and play, our senses of identity, the goals we set for ourselves and our societies. It will be the greatest intellectual achievement of all time, an achievement of science, of engineering, and of the humanities, whose significance is beyond humanity, beyond life, beyond good and bad. I call it the prize, Rich says. The prize is a great and glorious goal. Ambitious AI researchers should keep their eyes on the prize. Now let's then contrast that with a graphic, a picture that I have been very proud of, and it's kind of a showstopper. You show this graphic and people stop whatever they're doing and just want to talk about the graphic. Right? So, and the subject here is the basic goodness of human beings. So on Future Day, March 1st, 2022, I was doing a teaching session with Rich Sutton, and I showed this picture and started babbling away about the basic goodness of human beings. And he said, "Stop!" And then he carefully explained to me that there was no such thing as the basic goodness of human beings. There is only cooperation, and machines are as able to cooperate as human beings are. Yeah, and so this whole human-centric idea that all our thinking has to be oriented around humans, that humans have to be in charge of everything. So then, since then, I've been thinking about whether AI can help humans cooperate better. And so I've been recording the CBC Radio 1 News every morning at 4 a.m., but also NBC nightly news for kids, because I figure, well, let's see what we're teaching kids, right? And is there any evidence that humans are actually skilled at managing the earth, that like they're the best people to be in charge, or that they're getting better at it? Or no, there never is. I've been doing it every day from July 1st until now, and I have all those recordings, and they really show the opposite, that humans are remarkably bad at cooperating, and that if there was another entity that could do it better, humans would actually benefit from that. And so I think that's really what we're facing, that artificial intelligence that's smarter than we are could do a better job at managing the earth and everything on it, and for the good of everybody, not just humans. Yeah. So and if you think about that, like I have described to you the various ways in which machines impact my life, you know, the syllabus for the course has funny formatting and funny spacing. And that has something to do with you know, machines and me not seeing eye to eye about things. I did an AI seminar that seemed great from my point of view, but actually my image was pretty low res, so everything else was fine, but my image was like this pixelated thing. And yeah. And then recently I thought that I lost my phone, this phone. Yeah. And why did I think that? Because the app for tracking my phone said that it lost contact with the phone at 2:08 p.m. just outside of the Protective Services office. So I went there and talked to one of the officers there, and he convinced me that this phone had been stolen and taken by the thief on the LRT. And the reason that it lost signal like that is the LRT goes underground. It's a very convincing story that seemed to me to be reality until 1:30 in the morning, when I discovered the phone just sitting beside my desktop computer at home, and it hadn't been stolen at all, you know. So why did that happen? Well, I can show you. It's you know, something that could happen to any of you, because we have choices how we interact with machines. And so one of the choices is, when you get a new iPhone, you don't need to do all the setup right away. You reach a point and it kind of says to you, well, you can use the phone now, or do you want to complete the setup? Yeah. So the reason that my phone didn't act completely normally with Find Your iPhone, I never completed the setup, right? So I think that I kind of have an even-handed view of what the rights of machines are and human beings. And there are so many interesting issues around this. If you just think about the idea of AI utopia, whether that's reasonable, then there is a recent book, Email from the Future, 2084, so on, that in a very plausible way convinces you that what would be the characteristics of this utopia. It's not anything like supernatural or anything, just people being really kind to each other and in a very organized way, because dreams are synchronized around the world and everybody has these dreams teaching them how to be kind to other human beings and so on. And so that's what the utopia is, not some sort of such a good world that you can't imagine ever there being a world like that. No, it wouldn't have to be like that. It could be simply a world in which everybody is nice to each other. There are no trolls. The only category of human being that has disappeared are trolls on the internet. There aren't any trolls anymore. They're gone. They don't have anything to do. They've stopped enjoying what they used to do as, you know, professional trolls, spending all their time making other people unhappy, right? Nobody does that anymore in this future world. So really what it gets back to is the idea that we are too arrogant as humans, thinking that just because we're humans, that we must always push for humans being in charge, when all the prominent humans we see on TV and radio and the news seem to be acting in ways that are not exemplary, right? I mean, that's the way to act. That's one of the reasons they're on the news, is they're acting in such an aberrant way, right? So then if you think about the grant that we wrote about an AGI, artificial general intelligence, medical utopia, and how would that play out, particularly in public health? Public health is a lot about policy, right? And so there's a recent DeepMind study where they looked at new means of human cooperation, you know, new kinds of democratic processes, and the machine came up with processes which the humans preferred to human-generated processes. So couldn't we make changes like that in public health? Well, we probably could, where the human-generated policies could be improved upon by artificial intelligence generated policies. Whoop. And then, sorry. Yeah, then there is the whole thing about DALL-E. Now, you may know that the thing I'm known for in medicine is called the BAMP classification of transplant pathology. And the funniest thing for you to learn is when I first presented that at a meeting, I was heckled by two young women, kind of semi-prominent young women. And not only that, but I'd asked my father to come because I was doing something significant in my life. So he's witnessing these young women heckling me. There, of course, wasn't a picture of that, but you can put the text of that into DALL-E, this large language model for generating images, and it will come up with a very credible picture. I mean, doesn't this look like me being heckled? See, just my father's nose and mustache there in the background. Yeah. And so all sorts of things like that. You can now take different kinds of, you know, glomerular disease in the kidney and create much more colorful pictures of them than ever occur in real life. Ordinarily, because the kidney is an internal organ and doesn't benefit from being beautiful at all, it isn't very beautiful. But DALL-E can create very, very beautiful kidney pathology. And yeah, let's think about some other things that you might want to depict. You know, so let's think about, there's a Leonard Cohen song, Boogie Street, where he says, "I'm wanted in the traffic jam. They're saving me a place, you know, blah, blah, blah. So think about a traffic jam that you could enjoy, right? That's what that song seems to be about. How is that possible? Well, but if you put in the characteristics of my personality, according to personality test, Dali gives you this, which looks very much like an enjoyable traffic jam. You can see the cars just back to back and stuck and going nowhere, but there's this space for partying in between them, right? And everybody can get out of their cars and dance and dance in the streets, right? So yeah, it really changes everything about possibilities in the world. If no pictures were taken of something significant, you can get beautiful pictures of it by just entering the text of whatever it was. Yeah. So I think the problem with every comment on Twitter on Rich Sutton's published document there is people are taking pot shots, right? They're just thinking the most sort of clever, superficial thing they can say. Whereas this is actually the most significant thing that we could possibly be dealing with. And it just doesn't make sense to treat it as something superficial. So we would want to be thinking of, you know, responses to it that are as deep as the document itself. So doesn't this sound like it's talking about something important? Then why would you have only superficial responses? Why wouldn't you want to spend quite a bit of time thinking about what your, you know, responses to this are? And what are your own feelings about, relative to the entire Earth, what is humanity's importance? Is it like 10 billion times more important than anything else on Earth? Or, you know, where does that calculus put you? And what about good and bad? What does that mean exactly? Does it mean for the whole planet? Does it mean for humans? Does it mean for a certain segment of humans? For just you and your friends? You know, how do you define good and bad, right? And so what Rich Sutton has said is that our devices, the sentient machines around us, are sort of like our children. They're things that we created, and sometimes they act up the way teenage children do. They do things you don't really like, or are a bit jarring, and you wish they wouldn't do that. But still it is within the realm of what's legal to do and so on. And sort of they're still learning, and yeah. So it probably is very similar. And when you think about the idea of, in every competition, must humans always win? Well, why would that be the case if machines are capable of doing a much better job? And then you can read my 32 seconds from the Future and All That Jazz promo, and the 2 minutes from the trailer for my YouTube channel and so on, sort of talking about what would that world be like, where you wake up in the morning and suddenly everything's green outside, the oxygen tension in the air is much higher than it's ever been, the level of the oceans are all going down, when a human being tries to raise a hand in violence against another one, it's just gently wound down by some unseen force so you can't actually harm other people. Yeah, those are all things we don't know how to do, but it doesn't mean that they can't be done. It's just we humans don't know how to do them. So you can imagine a world maybe better, much better than our current world, where humans are actually not in charge at all or not always in charge. Yeah, so now I'm going to unshare this. And yeah, so now it's sort of time for you. What do you guys think about this? What are your thoughts? Are you now feeling deep regret that you got into this course? You can't imagine how you ever ended up in this terrible situation where you can't bring yourself to tell Dr. Solez that all those pot shot superficial comments on Twitter about what Dr. Sutton wrote, you agree with every one of them. Yeah, wish you had made those comments yourself. You just can't bring yourself to, you're just not brave enough to say that, but that's definitely how you're feeling. Yeah. So what do you think? And also, isn't it nice to be a part of a consequential course? And don't you feel that this probably is consequential one way or the other? It describes a broader context than you've ever thought about. And maybe I won't recite the whole poem because you might get mad if we have too much poetry this early in the course. But there is a poem of mine you may encounter, Diversity, the General Case Saves the Human Race, talking about being fair and empathetic to machines as smart as we are, as another part of diversity and equity and inclusion. So going beyond humans, so to also include sentient machines. Finally, I'll leave you with something you may have heard me talk about before. It's even in the poem. It's a part of the poem. But in January 2015, there was an AI safety conference in Puerto Rico. There were 98 people there. Rich Sutton was the only person from the University of Alberta and the only person on the side of the machines. There were not only scientists there, but like famous entrepreneurs and celebrities. It was a real who's who of everybody who might be interested in AI safety. And they were all planning to enslave sentient AI, keep it in a basement, keep it from doing anything important so it won't overpower humans. And Rich Sutton was the only one arguing that it should be treated fairly, just as you would treat any other human being that you just met, who just happens to be way smarter than you are, but doesn't mean you have to be mean to that person, right? And you should include that person in your circle of empathy. They will have needs that you could help with. And yeah, so, and he was the only one expressing that idea at that point. And so things have sort of continued from there. You can watch the two of us. You see mainly me, but there was the Strathern Summer Festival where they had poetry and stuff. And I recited a lot of artificial intelligence poetry, and Rich Sutton and I walked around the fairgrounds for that an entire day. It was very pleasant. It was before he was sort of discovered, right? So now he's probably too famous to do something like that, but at that time he was just an ordinary person, and so we walked around and talked about AI, and there's a pretty good recording of that from 2015. And then you probably know about AlphaGo. So one of the big breakthroughs is when computers solve the game of Go and beat the top ranking human player and Lee Sedol. And on the day that happened, so it was in South Korea, so I mean they're way ahead of us. So for Rich Sutton, it was a long day. I mean, in the middle of our day, he already knew that they had this big success. And how did he end that day? That's just so cool. That happens to be the day that we were doing a performance of the future and all that jazz, where we take important but maybe unpleasant subjects in science and put them in poetry and music and entertain people with that. So he came to our session, took part in the poetry and music, and that one of the most successful days in his life ended that way with us. Mallory Chipman, who's young singer who also runs my Instagram channel. Those of you who have discovered my channel, maybe you're having a hard time figuring out why it's so youthful. I'm 76, and you would expect an old and tired Instagram channel, but it's not, because Mallory Chipman runs it. If you direct message me on that channel, she will respond. And she's much more aware of all the danger of sort of Instagram communication than I am. And she will respond in a completely appropriate way that's probably much better than the response that I actually would have given. Yeah. So, okay, so I think that's enough for me. That's 29 minutes of Kim Solez. My God, can you imagine? What a waste of your life, right? Okay, so now it's time for you guys. What are you thinking? Are you like running, screaming from the course and can't imagine how you could possibly continue to the end? Or are you energized and looking forward to what might occur from here on? And yeah, give me your thoughts and feelings. Somebody needs to Ollie.
I guess I'll just be the first one to speak. Won't be anything profound or anything, so I hope you guys aren't expecting that. But I was thinking about how I believe it was Mr. Sutton who expressed the idea that there is no goodness in people when he was talking to you.
Yeah,
Just
no,
cooperation.
it isn't that there isn't any, but that what I was calling that graphic is the natural goodness of human beings.
Okay.
As if you just take a generic human, they're already good just by being human, right? They start out with this basic goodness, and that doesn't exist. If it did, then the news every day would be good news, right? When I listen to 4 a.m. to CBC Radio 1, just be all this cool, empathetic stuff that's going on, and how well people are cooperating and building structures that require global cooperation. It's all going great. Yeah, that's what would happen if there really was such a thing as basic goodness of human beings, where we were just naturally good. So he's not saying that a human can't be good, but he's saying they're not naturally good. Like when they exit from the womb, they're not like already good.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So, then you mentioned that like one of the main motives in humans is cooperation. And I'm sorry, there's some background noise, so I apologize for that. I'm in
No
a
problem.
public in Rutherford Library, but he mentioned that there's cooperation, and I found that really interesting. In that there's I feel like there is our motive is cooperation, but we use that as a means for certain selfish desires that humans have, which could be self-betterment in any sort of way or self-gain. And so I was just curious that when this artificial intelligence comes, then how humans have selfishness almost like innately within us for
Well,
personal
see,
betterment.
that's the thing that I think could change, right? So
Hmm.
the difference between Eliezer Yudkowsky's view of the world, I think you're absolutely right. That's how he sees it. We're all looking at clever ways to be mean to each other because it's a mean-spirited world, right? So get with a program. If you're not being mean, you don't understand what's going on. You got to practice being mean and making faces in the mirror so you can be mean better the next time you meet some other human, right? Yeah. So that's the world he sees, but that doesn't have to be what the world is. We're capable, I think, of cooperating much better, like that email from the future 2084 book suggests. And basically that this idea of nous, N-O-U-S, it's first identified as people find that they're having the same dreams. And they think, well, isn't this odd? You and I had exactly the same dream. Then what and they realize it's like a very beneficial infection of ideas of how to cooperate better that come to you in your sleep, and you wake up like slightly better informed of how to cooperate with other humans. And it seems to be a natural evolution that, is something that obviously humans needed. And maybe there were a couple of humans that had the genes that made this more possible. And, gradually it's just become more and more common. It's probably epigenetic too. So it's not just dependent upon genes, but also, other things that influence gene expression. It's just a really interesting idea. And it makes the idea of utopia plausible, I think, because if you think about utopia as a world completely different from the world today, where just everything is dramatically better and so on, that doesn't really make much sense. Whereas everybody could understand what a kinder world would be like, right? A world exactly the same as today, except everybody is nicer to each other, right? And going out of their way to help others, right? Yeah. So that seems like it would be as desirable as the other kind of utopia. It's just easier to figure out exactly what it would look like. Whereas, they're just utopia in general. And it was kind of cool. Very shortly after we started talking about this human cooperation and AI utopia, somebody asked Yuval Noah Harari what his idea was about utopia. He says, oh my goodness, no, that shouldn't be your goal, because if that's your goal, it's very hard to realize, and you'll get frustrated, and you'll start blaming other people that you weren't able to reach this goal. And but that's just starting from a completely neutral beginning and saying, well, should we go for utopia? No, we shouldn't. But if you consider Eliezer Yudkowsky's AGI ruin, a list of lethalities, these 43 bolded statements of how AI is going to kill us soon and nobody's doing anything about it. And, yeah. And as a countermeasure to Eliezer Yudkowsky, utopia is really good. I mean, it's the ideal countermeasure, I think. But you have to blame somebody for it, because otherwise you say, well, you were just sitting there. Why did you start spouting statements about utopia? That's stupid. But if you can say, well, no, it's Eliezer Yudkowsky got me to do it because, his stuff is such a downer. And then the whole thing, which I think is super cool, that article I sent you most recently about Japanese culture, that Japanese AI scientists don't believe in AGI doom at all. They never talk about it. It's just not a thing with them. And they are much more willing to think that there could be a spiritual consciousness in machines and devices and so on. That could be a real thing. It sort of fits with Shinto and so on. Yeah. So now let me talk about not understanding what I'm talking about, because I'm very familiar with it. You may think, and maybe you're right, but it's just not what's ever worked for me, that if somebody's giving a speech, what they should aim for is to have everybody in the audience understand the speech. And you may realize I've never done that. I've never, ever done that. Every speech I've ever given connects with about 2/3 of the people, and the other third don't have a clue what I'm talking about. They can't, not only can't they understand it at this moment, they think they'll never understand it, and they can't imagine why the other people seem so interested in this stuff I've been spouting, because to them it's completely meaningless. And the funniest thing that occurred, and you can sort of see this for yourself, in 2014, I did Nerd Night, Edmonton Nerd Night. Nerd Night is where we talk about science and drink, right? So alcohol and talking about science, right? Nerd Night, yeah. And I had been invited to give that Nerd Night talk by a specific person. And he told me afterwards he didn't understand anything I talked about. I said, really not? No, I didn't get it at all. I said, well, I'm terribly sorry. But so anyway, that's the way life is for me. So if you occasionally find you can't understand what I'm talking about at all, that's normal, because it's not like IQ based. It's not you're too dumb or anything. It's that somehow your life experience and where I'm coming from don't mesh, don't overlap. And so that's why you can't sort of get on the same wavelength as me. And I think there are a lot of people like that. If you think about Elon Musk, and then the number of people in your life who have told you Elon Musk is crazy, right? It's probably, at least 30 people have told you that, maybe more than 100. I don't know if you've lost count, the number of people who have told you that Elon Musk is crazy. It's not because he's crazy, it's because they don't understand what he's talking about, right? So, yeah, anyway, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not saying that when you give speeches, you shouldn't try to reach everybody in the audience. I'm just telling you that that's not case with me. As far as I know, I've never reached the entire audience, and I love to look up in the crowd. So I think, okay, well, that's the 2/3 that got it. Those guys have no idea what just happened, you know? Yeah. So that's not something to feel bad about, you know, even if there's only an audience of 4, there would be probably at least one of you or maybe 2 who really don't get at all what Kim Solez is talking about at this moment. Yeah. So, but I think you can also kind of be stimulated by the fact that when you talk to me, you find there's no upper bound of things. It isn't like everything's limited, right? Only get this much of this and this much of that. No, with me, there is no limit, right? There is no limit to how big you can think. And you may be sitting there thinking, oh, yes, there is. But okay, so you and I don't really agree, you know? You think there is a limit to how big you can think, but it maybe is still interesting or, I don't know, amusing to talk to somebody who doesn't think that there's a limit to how big you can think, right? Yeah, so that's another side of things. So you may know that in the course we've done various strange things, like there was a term where we did life-size cutouts of all the students. This is one of them. And there was another term where we did personality tests on all the students. And you know, I said, well, what did that cost? The cool thing is that the cost of the chloroplast cutouts and the personality tests is just about the same. But anyway, the thing about the personality test, if you think about what you think about the public nature of the results of your own personality test, what you think about that. So I had this secret plan that I'm sure my personality is so strange and weird that I'm not going to tell anybody, you know, like, yeah, I'll do it, but I'm not revealing it to anybody. But then I turned out to be a poster child for personality tests. Who knew? Because so my openness to experience is like sky high, as big as it could possibly be. That's not the same as sensation seeking. My sensation seeking is sort of normal, but my openness to experience is sky high. And my neuroticism, worrying about things that don't need to be worried about, is like 0. I don't spend any time worrying about things that don't need to be worried about. So that's a pretty unusual combination. One of the things that it means is if you have a problem, you want to talk to somebody, you don't feel like you're imposing so much on me, because you know the internal chatter in my head doesn't include a lot of sort of stuff of me worrying about things that don't need to be worried about, right? So I can worry about some of your stuff because I'm spending less time worrying about my stuff, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's the deal. So I think one of the things that may likely happen as a consequence of what we're doing here today is that the number of medical students associated with the course may go way up. You see, being a medical student taking the course is pretty easy. You don't have to write a paper. You don't have to give the final presentation. You don't have to go to all the teaching sessions, so on. And so it tends to be, you know, it's sort of fun and endorphin producing with a lot of onerous responsibilities. So it's a pretty good deal from the medical student point of view. And yeah, there's no real formal process. They just let me have their names, and then they have have a decision, or are they going to help us with the sort of AGI medical utopia, planning that, like we've written a grant about that, where we say that first and second year medical students are going to like generate prose and poetry around ideas of medical utopia. Yeah. But so I think that we may have more medical students after today, when they watch this video, see how charismatic all of you are, and they think, oh my God, I've missed an experience I really should have savored. So I want to join that course with Dr. Solez. Yeah. So anyway, that's the deal. Okay, so any other thoughts? Thank you.
Okay, but I still get better
Yeah, Dr. Soul, the tweet from Mr. Sutton, there was one sentence of it that I was just hoping to get more information in. Obviously, you could provide that.
Sure.
He says that, the introduction of artificial intelligence, it would change everything. And one of the lines he says is that it would change our senses of identity.
Yes.
If you could you just elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. Well, like when you think about who you are, right? So maybe up until this point, one of the ways you would answer that, if you meet someone you haven't met before, start telling them like what you're taking in school, or what profession you're going into, and so on. But what about just your humanness and, being a human living on planet Earth, right? Like, do you think much about your relationship to the other animals? Maybe if you have a pet, but if you don't have a pet, maybe you never think about that. Maybe when you step on an ant, you don't think about it. If you step on something really big, you might think about it, but yeah. So this whole thing of kind of what are we here for? What should the goals of the planet overall be? Should we burn down the entire Amazon rainforest? That, would that be good for companies to eliminate the rainforest entirely and just ship that timber? I don't know. Yeah. So those are the kinds of questions then, are sort of, where do humans fit in? Are they automatically entitled to being in charge of things and dominance over all the other life forms on Earth and so on? Or do they have no basic entitlement whatsoever? I mean, one of the things you're required to know in the course is that sequence that Rich Sutton talks about. Give up your sense of entitlement, right? And include sentient AI in your circle of empathy, treating it as you would any other person that you just met, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I think that's like whether inhabitants of the Earth who are not human have rights, and how their rights compare to your rights, how their value compares to your value. Really old elephant who's known many other elephants, and taken part in a lot of elephant ceremonies and stuff like that. Is that being getting close to the importance that you have? Or is there a huge difference? Are you 10 billion times more important in the world than that really elderly elephant who's known hundreds of other elephants and taken part in funeral ceremonies for the passing of other elephants? So yeah. So So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think, oh, sorry to interrupt you,
oh,
but I feel like that's also one of the, like this whole idea, it's one of the things that induces fear into a lot of people of AI. This thing that, you know, our assumed status of superiority over everything, it's going to be put into question. So I feel like that's something, and like I touched on earlier just slightly, it's our selfishness that we have a bit of, and so I feel like humans are a little hesitant to acknowledge that there could be something, you know, equivalent to us even. And so, yeah.
yeah. But you know, it's like if you look at your phone and recent phone calls that you've made, some of them will be to automated attendants. So there you're dealing with an AI. And if you look at the success of the call, it used to be that those calls were always a failure and frustrating and would make you really mad. So but now it's sort of the opposite. A lot of phone calls to automated attendants take care of whatever you were trying to take care of much more efficiently and better than if you had reached a real human, right? So I mean, we're kind of already getting a taste of that world where AI does some things better than we do. And you find companies now where customer service is really hard because the humans ask you things that's really hard to figure out the answer to, whereas they can easily answer it by just using the company's software and trying things out. You know, like, does it accept this? Does it not accept this? You know, it is frequently faster to just leave out customer service, go and start entering things into the software, and you will quickly figure out, you know, what the rules are. Yeah, sorry about that. And so people are getting better at getting sort of hunches from computer interactions, right? To getting sort of clues from, you know, computer interactions where you're asking fewer questions because everybody will make fun of you if you ask something that Google can answer in a third of a second. You know, why do you ask that question? Look, you know, I mean, Google knows it immediately. What's do you have a falling out with Google? What's wrong with you? Yeah. So yeah, there are lots of things that are changing, and so I think it means that it's worth the time to sort of think deeply about what Rich Sutton has written here, and see if you kind of think of what would the next step be, and if you're in medicine, is this idea of AGI medical utopia, is that a logical next step? The alternative is so, like, for 5 years between 2014 and 2019, I was heavily involved with Tuesday night poetry. Used to be at Rouge Lounge, and then it was at the Nook Cafe. But these were sort of people of medical students' age, but really in marginal areas of society. You know, maybe some of them are homeless, some are gender fluid, where just the way they look angers other people, so that they're in danger the moment that they leave the house every day and stuff. Yeah, so I spent a long time with that poetry group. I provided the lighting, the video editing. So some of these homeless young people would go to the library to interact with me about the editing of their poetry video. That was really cool. And you know, it doesn't it seem like something otherworldly in a way, like it wouldn't be everywhere where young people would have that opportunity. So what happened in 2019, you'd say, oh yeah, I know what happened with COVID. No, it was before COVID. So the current poet laureate of the city, Titi Lope Shanuga, was leading those two Tuesday night poetry sessions, and just things were happening that she shouldn't have to put up with. She was getting threats by email. People would show up so high that they couldn't even speak, you know, and so you'd have these vibrating people so high on drugs that they couldn't even speak. Yeah, so it sort of came to a natural end. She decided to wind down the open mic sessions. And then shortly afterwards, it became clear that we were in a pandemic, and it didn't make sense to have face-to-face meetings anyway. And so, yeah, so there haven't been those poetry sessions since late 2019. But that's another side of it. Like I can also conceive of, you know, medical students are a little bit of an elite population, not as much as they used to be, but still to some extent they are. And so it's probably good to balance it out with these at-risk young people poets. So that's the current plan for the grant. Yeah, so other thoughts? Paula, Katarina, yeah, do you have?
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. We touched a lot of topics, but I would like to expand a little bit on Ali's last comment on this need for the humans to let go of our like human-centric view. I was looking at Mr. Jankowski's tweet that you sent us that like wanted to counter Sutton's view, I think. And in the brackets, he says that creating AI purely by throwing more compute and data wouldn't be much of an intellectual achievement. But I got the feeling that in this, by saying this, is not really countering what Sutton said, because if we like let AI grow by itself, we are letting go of like our human arrogance.
Yeah,
and that would be the intellectual achievement.
Yeah, so that document called Bitter Lesson is simply about the fact that all the big achievements of AI, you would think from a human point of view that they must consist of teaching the AI the way humans do things, and then they have this great success. That has never been the case. So it's that AIs have a different model of the world, and that model to some extent works better than the human model. So they base their approach to things on the model that they create. So that bitter lesson is just that if you think of all the great successes of AI that you are personally familiar with, you'll find they all come from basic computing. They don't come from the computer first saying, well, I better learn how humans do this, better study human behavior for a long time. And then I'll know. No, they don't need that at all. As a matter of fact, it slows them down. If you weigh them down with a lot of information of how humans do things, that means that they'll reach the goal later than if they just did it through pure, computing. And so that's what that's about. And it's a very important insight. It's not something that Rich is advocating. It's an observation that he's making, that he's telling you about. This is the way the world works. All the big advances that computers make are not from taking what humans know and trying to act like humans. No, it isn't that at all. It's just trying directly, using computing to figure the thing out. Yeah, without taking into account how humans do it. Yeah. So that, and I also think that Eliezer may not know how youthful Rich Sutton is. He seems to be talking about, what he might have as a legacy when he passes on to the next life. He's a cancer survivor, so he's been through a lot, but he's remarkably well. So he may outlive Eliezer for many decades. So yeah. So other questions or things you want to talk about?
If we can.
Yeah.
I just want to have just one question, and maybe it's not very relevant, but just this is keeps repeating in my head. Do you think just because you know that humans are not as good or as kind, especially to each other, do you think any external situation would make us be better, or is just in the everyday life, if it's continue to be like it is, everything we would say normal, we will never get that kindness, or any outside situation might change us?
Yeah. No, see
really
that
big situation.
that is exactly what I'm working on the most. The reason I'm recording those newscasts every morning and so on is trying to figure out what's going wrong with humans cooperating. In what areas could AI suggest something different where humans would be able to cooperate better? That's what I'm aiming for. And I'm sure it's possible. I told you already about the democratic processes where AI came up with this new way of democratic process, which humans liked better. So you can imagine that it really is possible that with the better model or different model of the world that AIs have, they'll be able to think of a new way or new ways that humans could actually work together and be kind to each other that would be superior to what humans themselves are able to think of. And that's what makes this whole thing worthwhile. If it were true that computers can only add to what humans already know, they've got no mojo themselves. They can't really do anything on their own. They have to steal ideas from humans and build on them. If that was true, then maybe this isn't going anywhere. There won't be much of an advance because it's just sort of incremental, maybe a few percent better. But if you realize that humans and machines have completely different models of the world and are analyzing things completely differently, and that ultimately machines are going to be a lot smarter, and we already have these large language models that are sort of taking the entire knowledge in the entire public internet and putting it together. That's where the graphics from DALL-E come from. So yeah, they're I think not only is it true that they can improve some areas, they can improve all areas. Everything about human life that could use improvement, AIs could suggest something useful to make it better. Yeah, that's my feeling about it. Yeah, so so it's 3:08. We have 12 minutes left in the class period. Let me ask you if any structural questions we've identified now, like when the midterm will be. I think it's on the 29th that you get the midterm. It's a take-home midterm, and it's returned on the 1st. You might wonder why it's a take-home. Why don't we do it in class? Well, Shauna Panya's part of it. The students really enjoy her comments, and I think that all takes time. So it's good for the students to have more time, so they don't feel rushed filling out that part of the exam, and it's good to get the full experience of Shauna's reaction to what you've written, and what you've written, and that sort of thing. And it's only 2 days of your life. We used to have the take-home exam due in 5 days. And there I felt really guilty, because I saw some students spending the entire 5 days of their life just working on the midterm. I tell them not to, but they still do. Every waking moment they're thinking, can I fine tune this? Can I make it a little better? Yeah, so five days is way too long. Yeah, and then the paper is also due on the 1st of December. Your presentations are currently scheduled, all 3 of you, for the last day of class, which is December the 8th. But what about December 6th? Well, December 6th would also be a potential presentation date. One of you didn't want to do it on the 8th. It's also a potential party date if you want to have a party. Probably thinking, what kind of a party would that be for 3 people? No, I mean, you could ask other people. The medical students could come. We used to do a lot of that kind of thing before COVID, and there was money for it. You probably know that to have a university club, you have to have money in the bank, right? If it's a club, it has to have money, right? So it has to have a bank account, then it's a real University of Alberta club. So there was a club for the course, and we used the money to pay for food and drink and entertainment, that sort of thing. And maybe some of the final presentations would be in a session that was partly entertainment and partly you. Anyway, yeah. So we used to do that. It's totally up to you, but you guys, as we get closer to the end of the course, can figure out how you want to work things. So the final presentation is 20 minutes with 10 minutes discussion. So in that single class period on the 8th, we can probably fit all 3 of you if that is your wish, if you want to all have as much time to work on it. But if you want to do it earlier, that's also possible. The topic of the paper and the final presentation has to be the same. And it can't be similar to any other course you've ever taken. And of course, this course is completely different from any other course you've ever taken. So the topic needs to be oriented around things like existential risk, Moore's law, exponential rate of change of society, that sort of thing, the kind of things that are particularly characteristic of this course and that you wouldn't find in another course. So for instance, like the course is Technology and the Future of Medicine. So if you just had final presentation, let's say on the pacemaker, history and future of the pacemaker. No, that doesn't really do it because it doesn't have that sense of exponential and like we're talking in this course mainly about speculative content, stuff that doesn't exist yet, right? So all your other courses, you're talking about things that already exist. Here we're talking about a future that doesn't exist yet, but will exist future soon. So that's the situation. Yeah. So I was trying to answer some anticipated questions. Do you have other questions that I haven't answered? Or even
I guess my questions are going to build up as I get through more of the lectures. So hopefully I'll have some harder hitting questions for you as the course goes on. But
okay.
yeah, right now I just have a fully open mind. Like I'm not on either side at the moment. So I'm just like fully trying to gather as much information as I can. So but hopefully by the end of the course, I'll have a position to take.
Right.
But yeah, right now I'm just trying to learn. I'm just trying to, get enough information to have the context to make a decision.
Sure. No,
Yeah,
I
super
think
interesting so far.
Perfectly fair. Yeah. So, okay, we've got 7 minutes. Let's just see. In the chat. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Dana says it was so nice to meet everybody, and I look forward to considering more of these concepts and ideas as the class progresses. Great. Okay. So, yeah, so I'm trying to decide what to do with the recording. So if you think of what Eliezer wrote and the other people, the first part of what we did today is sort of a reaction to that, right? But I don't know that it seems to me they could decide whether they want to watch the whole 80 minutes or not. It's like, yeah, I don't know if we necessarily have to edit off the rest of it. So I think I would plan to put up the whole thing, but with a title that kind of suggests that we are reacting to Rich Sutton's posting of September 29th. Yeah, so just give you some idea for what's going on in my life. Tomorrow we're doing the first ever joint kidney pathology conference between Calgary and Edmonton. We've been doing sort of regional ones where Calgary does a separate one in the south and we do one in the north. So we're bringing the North and South together tomorrow at 1 p.m. to talk about kidney pathology. The residents have just indicated what they want me to teach them about. And you're probably thinking it's some strange and obscure thing that you wouldn't be interested in because they're pathology residents and you're not. No, but they want me to talk about artificial intelligence in January and the future of pathology and medicine in June of 2023. So, yeah. So that's what they've picked, and I'm happy to talk about those things. So, yeah. Yeah, and we are currently deciding what to do about a central repository for the BAMP classification. So BAMP classification, which I created, is an unusual medical standard in that there is no competing standard, right? You think there'd be like the Solez classification and hundreds of others with other people's names, but yeah. So that's kind of what I was hoping would happen 31 years ago. I thought giving it the name of BAMP isn't big enough to have a medical school, right? It couldn't ever have a medical school. It's too small a town, right? So it is therefore a beautiful place in the world that's sort of shared by everybody equally, you know, and so by giving it that name, you could create classification for everybody in the world. So that's sort of what we have. So now, though, that classification changes and we want to figure out how to keep track of that. So we want to keep version control, right? To say, well, this is the version as of this point, and then we made this change because of this reason, and then that's the next version, and so on. Yeah, and it turns out that's really like our website currently costs $34.60 a month, and when we go to version control, it'll cost like $1,000 to $1,500 Canadian a month. So it's going to be a huge change in the sort of the cost of running a website that keeps accurate track of versions of documents. Isn't that the most boring thing anyone ever told you about? But yeah, that's you may wonder what kidney pathologists get excited by, and it's version control. You know, other things may excite you, but what excites us is version control. That's what we're currently working on. Yeah. So we're having a big meeting about that on Monday. So what about the loneliness of the long distance LABMP 590 student? Like, are you feeling incredibly lonely all the time, that you never get any live Zooms like this? And, you know, it's just you spend most of the day weeping because your days are so sorrowful because there's very little human contact? Or are you sort of doing okay with the limited human contact? Or, yeah.
I mean, I guess I've had some classes where it was asynchronous during in the peak of COVID.
Yeah.
So I've kind of experienced the concept before. Obviously, I'd prefer if we were meeting in person every single week.
Yeah.
But I mean, this works. This is perfectly fine. Look, it's something I'm used to, so it's not anything I'm going to complain about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's working out well.
Good. No. Well, I'm quite happy. I mean, if you want to distill down to its essence, what's happened here, I planned to take the semester off, right? That was my plan. And then students like you, or actually you students, convinced me that I could still continue with the course, even though we weren't having very many live sessions. And I think with most courses that they wouldn't have worked, because at a certain point they'd say, forget it, I'm not gonna do anything extra for this stupid course, Yeah, so it's kind of nice that it's the course that wouldn't die, right? Even when the instructor was going to take a semester off, the course reared its head and kept going anyway. Yeah, so that's what's happening.
Thank you for that as well. You didn't have to teach the course this semester, but you took it up anyways. And yeah, thank you for that.
No, I love the course. My whole professional life is mainly oriented around the course. It just seemed not to be practical to keep it going this term in the usual way. And I'm just very grateful that we've been able to find another way to do it that fit with the other things that I was doing. The 30th anniversary BAMP meeting, September 19th to 23rd, was really successful and fun. And, we had many worries about it, and all the bad things we worried about didn't happen, and all the good things we hoped for did happen. So it was kind of nice. Yeah, and it was nice to see all those people. One of the things you may encounter about me is the idea that Leonard Cohen said I was serially surreal. So in other words, surreal over and over and over again, right? Yeah. And one of the things that was surreal about the Banff meeting is Michael Overdoin, who runs the pitch session that I pitch my company at, Discovery Lab. He came to Banff and went to our meeting. I'm so surprised to see him there. And he has the idea, and maybe we'll make it come true, that maybe Google DeepMind could invest directly in Edmonton, like take unused properties and so on in the city and convert them into educational stuff that DeepMind is doing to further artificial intelligence. Yeah, so I don't know. It's an interesting idea. It's not completely impractical. Well, it's just a lot of fun to think about. So think about like abandoned properties that you're aware of in the city, and think of them all being converted into something useful, right? Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. Anyway, we'll see what happens about that. Okay, well, it's been great getting together with you guys, and we'll stay in touch, and maybe we'll have another session like this sometime soon. And yeah, let me know if you need anything. And yeah, we could even have a face-to-face session if you wanted. I know the idea is shocking, but anyway, it's allowed. We
would
can
be great.
do it. Yeah, we even have a room, right? That room is sort of empty every Tuesday and Thursday between 2 and 3:20. You could go there sometime and actually inhabit the room. Yeah, so that would be cool. Okay, well, lots to think about. Thanks for joining me, and let me know if you have any questions. Of course, the other alternative, if you have something that seems like a much too stupid question to ask Dr. Solez, Taryn Stokowski is our lead TA, and she's working very hard on E-class and so on to make the back end of the course work for you guys, so you could also ask her things. And she's a very wise person, possibly wiser than me. And so anyway, you could also learn a lot of things from her. And you could ask her about her coroplast cutouts, because you know you may think having a cutout is just simple, but Taryn has taken it to the nth degree. So she had 2 cutouts, and she had a picture taken of herself between the 2 cutouts. And then we made a cutout of all 3 of like those 3 images of her. And the Banners place on 99th Street that makes the cutouts said, as far as they're aware, no one has ever done that before. Yeah, so at Taryn's home, she has that cutout of all 3 versions of her. Yeah, so there. So yeah, and she likes to plant them in spooky corners of the garage, and like where you at least expect her to be. There she is. Yeah, yeah. So then you can be thinking about what quirky thing should we do this term, you know? But if you want to up the ante and do something much quirkier than any other group of students has ever done, what would it be? Yeah, so anyway, you can think about that. Okay, well, I think if I keep going on, then you will conclude that I'm just a big waste of time. So I'm gonna end it here, and thank you very much, and we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Take care.
Solez. All right, take
Bye-bye.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you.